secret. There is secrecy in the negotiations. And I disagree on the fact that secrecy is essential for negotiations. It might be in the case of bilateral trading agreements, but if you are discussing an agreement at the level of a plurilateral setup, which enjoins to create enforcement mechanisms which will actually lead to a paradigm shift as compared to what was mandated in TRIPS, then this is not the right fora to discuss it. And it was a non-inclusive, a unilateral process, as I would like to emphasize again. Now, if you look at the content of this, the content is asymmetric. While TRIPS looks at the entire issue of IP in the context of development, in the context of needs of countries to aspire to a level of development that developed countries have already achieved, the need for technology transfer, and so many other aspects which are touched upon by TRIPS. And here you have an agreement which only talks about enforcement. It only just talks about how to improve enforcement. It is as if enforcement is an end by itself. But it was to be a means to an end, after all. TRIPS said you will provide enforcement. At the same time, there will be technology transfer. There will be public health issues will be adequately addressed. And it was respected that countries are at different levels of development and that they will have to devise an IPR regime which is suitable to them. This is not at all there in ACTA, which is a sad part of it. You look at the provisions of ACTA, and it is said that it's not a substantive ACTA agreement, but we've tried to analyze it preliminarily. I did it before I came for this conference, and I would like to say that a few comments on it. You look at the counterfeit trademark definition. That leaves a lot of interpretational problems. It says that a good is said to be infringed in a country where the procedure is sought to be evoked. Now, this leads to a complete dilemma on where should be the infringement be? Will it be the right holder who will choose where the infringement has to be? Or does it mean that in-transit products goods are to be enforced against, which is not part of, which is clearly not required under TRIPS? Effectively, substantively, you're going beyond what is provided under TRIPS. Similarly, you have a similar mirror provision in copyright piracy. You look at the territory of a country that is defined, you enclose the free zones as well. Obviously, in-transit is being covered in that. And how then can we say that access to medicines will not be affected? Because effectively, as part of ACTA, it covers all IPs. It is not just trademark and copyright piracy. The first few provisions itself says IP is all 7 rights that are there in Section 2 of TRIPS. If you look at the provisions in damages, it actually tells you the nature of evidence that has to be filed, the kind of the kind of decisions that can be taken. It actually gets into the nitty-gritties of deciding what the legal authorities have to do. Again, it is going beyond what was provided under TRIPS, much beyond what was provided under TRIPS. In that sense, it removes the sovereign rights. In a way, it affects it. Because here you have a situation where you're already told what action needs to be taken. And it removes the flexibilities, the ability to monitor, to have a mechanism which suits your country's requirements. And what about the safeguards? You have a situation where an IP holder on a mere suspicion can go and raise an issue and get the customs to take action. It's a mere suspicion. And the importer doesn't need to be informed. There is no indemnification if the information is wrong. Now, where is the balance? There are no safeguards. You can't have an IP right, which is a private right, with overriding rights given to the IP holder. Because we are not against enforcement. We are not against IP right holders being provided the right that they need to have, to innovate, to trade, to have a comfort level. And in fact, in my next few slides, I'll tell you exactly how India has improved its enforcement, both in terms of enforcement as well as policy development that has happened. But you cannot accelerate that out of context. You cannot just focus on one aspect and just not look at other aspects of IP. let us look at how things have developed. In 1995, the TRIPS agreement was signed. In 2005, in case of India, our 10-year transition period ended. We were to comply with TRIPS. In 2006, the ACTA initiative began, Impact initiative began, Secure began in 2007. Now you have all these developments happening soon after. It's obvious that the IP owners they did not get what they wished to get under TRIPS, and it was soon after that they started off with their plurilateral agreements to increase IP enforcement. And in 2016, you have LDCs to comply with TRIPS. So it's even before they can comply with TRIPS, they will have to face an economic environment which provides IP protection much greater than what was ever mandated under TRIPS. If we look at the Indian experience, we signed TRIPS in 1995. We've met our obligations in that. And while we amended our laws, we also took into account the conditions of our country and our aspirations, and to do that, we in fact went TRIPS Plus in many of our provisions. Be it the Copyright Act, be it the Patents Act, we have gone beyond what was mandated under TRIPS. In fact, if you look at the administrative mechanism, the implementation framework on enforcement also, we have a Copyright Enforcement Board which monitors enforcements on copyright. We have an interministerial group on enforcement, which looks at enforcement as a whole. And IPR cells were created in each of the 28 states. India is a federal country. It has a federal setup. There are 28 states and 600 districts. Each state has an IPR cell in the police department. There are ongoing programs for capacity building, for enforcement agencies, for judiciary, for creating awareness, for building respect for IP. And there has been a calibrated progression in policy. So we amended our Trademarks Act last year to comply with the Madrid Agreement. We are in the process of amending our Copyright Act to take into account the developments in the digital environment. What shape it takes finally is of course, it'll come when it comes because it is in the Parliament. But the fact that the amendment is being sought to be carried out is an indication that the government and the people realize there is a demand inherently from the economy to have it. There has been progression even in enforcement. We have a federal setup, so states are supposed to enforce the IP law in terms of enforcement. And many of these states have actually brought in piracy as part of what they call a Gunda Act. So bootlegger or a drug peddler is equated to a video pirater, and there is criminal punishment, in fact, leads to a jail without a remedy. In fact, all the southern states, most of the southern states, Maharashtra, Delhi, have it. If you, in that sense, and now we are seeing a new phenomenon where IP owners, we always had a very strong IP owner association for our film and music industry because that's a very thriving industry. And they have been associated with the police to see that raids happen and that copyright piracy is checked. But now we have a pan-industry IP owners association being created in some of the major industrial chambers. And the whole issue is, and rightly so, that the IP owners will become a stakeholder. They would involve